Welcome to Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
Boo! This episode, we're going to be talking about undead. Welcome to Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
This episode, we're going to be talking about undead. Are they necromantic or are they naturally occurring? And do they always have to be evil?
Well, that's a good question. Everybody always assumes that all undead are evil. But what if they're just, a ghost who feels betrayed and doesn't want to leave an area? Are they evil for that?
Yeah.
So in D&D and Pathfinder, undead are like one of those enemies that you're always going to face. You're always going to face an army of undead or zombies or whatever, skeletons. They're easy to throw into the mix, because they're essentially, easy to play. They don't really have a whole lot of, complications behind them. Vampires, yeah. Stuff like that. So that essentially, they're one of the most common enemies that you always fight, And so, if you're a cleric and you have turn undead and everything like that. I'm pretty certain that when we first started playing Pathfinder, one of the first enemies we encountered were either like super low level outlaws or some undead.
Yeah. Skeletons, zombies.
Something we could kill easy, get some XP.
Yeah, kind of the old Wizard's Tower. Oh, there's probably an old graveyard there.
Yeah.
With ghosts or with zombies and skeletons walking around.
I remember one of the first games we were in, there was this thing in a village that said, the graveyard seems to be full of undead. We can't go in and visit our relatives. We'd like some brave people to go in there and clear the place out. So we went in there, and of course there were some skeletons and some, ghouls or whatever. And they weren't really ghouls. They were kind of like low level. Definitely weren't ghouls. Yeah. They were low level kind of undead floating around. We had to chase them out, whatever. And of course it led to something more complex with necromancy, which we'll talk about, but it's kind of those enemies that a DM will throw at some low-level players just to get them used to combat.
Yep, because they're low, easy to kill, and kind of makes the team start working together.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, undead, how do they come about?
Well, I think we looked at this and we decided that we were going to break it up into two areas. One is necromancy. Essentially,
rise.
A necromancer is going to seek to raise undead to do his or her bidding.
Yeah.
And then you have naturally occurring, which is like maligned ghosts who don't want to leave an area, or a person who dies or is murdered, who haunts an area, who wants to communicate to the living somehow.
Yeah.
So we look at that and we have different kind of types. So
your necromancy is, usually your evil or not so good wizard or even cleric.
Yeah.
Who is raising up undead for nefarious reasons, or maybe even they're using them to guard their home.
Yeah. Well, so would raised undead be necessarily evil?
I think it would kind of depend upon their purpose and how they were done. So let's look at the basic ones.
Okay.
Skeletons. Skeletons are usually they don't just come about because something had to have brought them back. Whether it's some kind of magic, whether that's arcane or religious type spell casting. To cause their bones to reform and stick together and animate.
So usually they're created with sort of malicious intent. A guy will raise 4 or 5 skeletons and sick them on someone they don't like. Use them as guards or something like that. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that they're evil or anything like that. They're just under malicious control. So they're kind of forced to do whatever the control tells them to do. And once you smash them to pieces, then they kind of go back to wherever they came from, their spirit.
So, so one of the great movies was, I think it was Jason and the Argonauts.
Mm-hmm.
And there was the evil wizard who threw the teeth down that grew out into zombies that Jason had to
Skeletons.
fight. Yeah, skeleton.
Skeletons.
Jason had to fight.
Yeah, it was a great scene. The skeleton fighting.
Fantastic.
Destroy them! Kill! Kill them all!
Yeah.
Harry Holdhauser, stop motion animation.
Ray Harryhausen.
Ray Harryhausen, that's his name.
Yeah.
Tom's a movie buff.
So, the way that was filmed, all the stop action zombies and stuff, not zombies, but the skeletons, was really amazing for its time period. And even if you see them today, they still look pretty good.
Yeah.
So.
And I think even some of the Sinbad brought in some skeletons.
It always seemed like they were fighting skeletons for one reason or another. That was just kind of like this thing they would throw in. Undead enemies. That's kind of, the enemies that they would throw in the movies. Kind of have some creepy skeletons come up out of the ground and you have to fight them. So when we talk about, a Banshee. Now, a Banshee, I don't think have we encountered one in a game?
There might have been one in Morwicka, in the haunted house.
Okay.
There might have been a Banshee in there. I can't remember.
So a Banshee, what I always think is that
there wasn't a Banshee.
They're kind of tied down to an area, like a barrow. They're kind of like a barrow wight in a way. And they wail because they're in torment.
Right. Well, if you hit upon the old myth of the Irish, the Banshee, if you hear the Banshee, then you or a family member is soon to die.
Okay, so it was a warning ghost then.
Yeah, or sometimes if you hurt the Banshee, it meant that you were going to die within a certain time frame.
But it's kind of a naturally occurring.
When Satan questions, who replies? Whence blows this wind that chills? What answers when the Banshee cries and kills and kills and kills?
It was usually a female who had died in some wicked form, or maybe she was wicked herself.
Okay, so like a person,
she was spiteful.
A person who had an untimely death, wasn't ready to die, and attached to an area, who kept coming back and saying, this is my area, get out, I'm looking for my lost lover, whatever, that kind of a ghost. So it's kind of like a naturally occurring ghost.
Or maybe they were cursed because somebody in the family killed them, so now they're doomed, so now they're just going to haunt the area and and take you out.
So let's contrast that with ghast or ghouls.
Right, ghast and ghouls are a more powerful ghoul.
Okay.
And they usually live with ghouls and are more the leader of the pack.
Okay.
Now, they can be both natural and
necromantic?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they can be raised then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but ghouls, if you die from the bite of a ghoul, then you come back as a ghoul. Same with a ghast.
Okay, so that's a way that they can, almost like, if you want to put reproduce, but they can reproduce by biting someone or contacting them somehow.
Right.
So then that they can create more.
Yeah. So when a ghast or a ghoul bites you, it's spittle or
whatever it is. Yeah, their energy or
energy.
Power.
When you die, it drains into you, and now you come back as one.
Okay. So what's really their purpose then? Do they just roam around attacking people? Or?
Yeah, they like to live in graveyards and things like that to
Okay.
eat the flesh of the dead and the flesh of the living. And
That's what they say. The whole idea of a ghoul is actually a creature that eats the flesh of the dead.
Yeah.
That's the old traditional idea
yeah.
of a ghoul.
So people bury him in the graveyard.
Yeah.
The ghoul will come in and eat the dead. And,
Okay. Yeah.
But if you die by the bite of a ghoul or a ghast, then you come back as one of them.
Okay. Now, contrast that with a ghost, because ghosts can be naturally occurring.
Right.
So ghosts then would just be wandering around a graveyard because they have a message for
Right.
living people, or they suffered
No.
an untimely death.
Now, let's kind of reverse things up here a little bit, because
Okay.
then there's alignment side of this, okay? So
Okay.
banshees are normally considered to be evil, because if you're near them, they're going to cry out, and you're going to hear them, and you're going to die.
Okay. They're
Okay.
considered to be evil. All
A
right.
ghast and a ghoul is also considered to be evil, because
Okay.
if you go into their graveyard,
Sure.
they're going to attack you,
Sure.
because they want to eat your flesh and turn you into one of them.
Right.
Or
right.
eat you.
Right.
A ghost, I don't necessarily see a ghost as evil, because I think they might be listed as evil, but a ghost to me is more neutral. Now, could it be evil? Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody who was a spiteful person who lived and
Yeah.
died, but maybe it's somebody who just couldn't pass on because they didn't want to leave their family member, and now they got stuck.
Do exactly as I say. Get ready. Ready?
Get her!
That's a really interesting way to look at it, is if you use a ghost in gameplay, would the ghost be like a measure? Would it be like a kind of a person who basically wanted to, impart some information to someone? Or would they be the kind of person who would advance gameplay along by, creating a plot element where they're attacking someone, or they're just basically part of the background?
Yeah.
They
Maybe they just want to pass on to the next life, and they're and they're trying to get you to do that.
Yeah, so it doesn't actually have to be evil. The ghost can just be a plot element,
Yeah.
within a haunted house. How do you get these ghosts out of here? Well, you can banish them to, banish undead, or you can convince the ghost to leave the house and go on to the netherworld. Why is it hanging around here? That
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
I think there was an adventure you guys had that the ghost gave you a task, and then once you did that, then it freed the ghost. And
Yeah. We had to solve a mystery about why the ghost was killed. It didn't know, but we investigated it, we solved the mystery, and we freed the ghost up, and it left willingly. So there you go. It
Yeah.
could be a plot element, and it doesn't have to be evil.
right. Grave Knight.
So what is a grave knight?
Grave Knight is usually like a fallen paladin or fallen knight who's there to protect, like a lich.
Ah, so a lich's bodyguard.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're probably going to be bad.
Yeah, they're usually evil.
Okay.
They're created with necromancy.
Are they a fighter? Are they like a high-level fighter that's basically an undead high-level fighter?
Yeah, very much so.
So what are their advantages? Would they use weaponry? Or would
They
they
do use
ghoul,
weaponry and
ghoul
armor.
touch or night touch or grave touch or something like that?
I don't know exactly of all their abilities, but they do use weapons and they do use armor, and they can be pretty tough and nasty and
Okay.
hard to take down.
Wow.
So typically they are considered to be evil because they're put into service by a lich.
Okay, by a lich as like a bodyguard or a soldier, foot soldier.
Right.
So then if we want to talk about a grave knight and being like the foot soldier of a lich, what exactly is a lich?
So a lich is usually an evil cleric or wizard who wants to live forever, and they've cast this really complex spell which ends up killing them and puts their life force into a phylactery.
Okay.
A little vial that they hide away, and
Okay.
now they live forever.
Okay.
But usually a lich, the longer they live, the more senile they become.
Okay.
I remember an adventure inside of a Dragon magazine that was about a lich, and the lich was not necessarily evil. He was so senile that he couldn't remember anything and thought he was still alive. And
Wow. That's interesting, because I've always assumed that all liches are evil.
they typically are.
That
they can cast. They're very high level clerics or wizards that can
That
cast
they
very
do
powerful
things for
spells.
evil purposes.
And you can't kill them unless you destroy their phylactery,
Oh, okay. You got to find their phylactery.
which they hide away.
Yeah. It's kind of like a lot of tropes that you run across in like recent books and movies and stuff, that you have to
Yeah.
find the evil person's source. I'm thinking more like about the Harry Potter book series, stuff like that. where you have to, put everything together and solve the mystery to get all, to get the phylactery together, and then once you destroy it, you can basically take out the baddie.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a couple adventures that have liches in them.
Well, I have some that started off because of a lich.
Yeah.
There's the Stones of Chaos, which the lich. Well, there was a wizard who went looking for a source of extreme power, found it, and it ended up taking part of his life force and putting into it, which then caused him to rot and decay and turn into a lich and turn him evil, and in which when he got killed off, well, his life force was stuck into that artifact, which then seeped into the earth, which then caused chaos.
So
evil.
That's part of it then, that you have like an evil lich who basically corrupted everything around him or her by their evil magic.
Yeah. And it's not always somebody who's evil, it's somebody who just is trying to live forever, extend their life.
Okay.
But the magics of it are bad.
So coming off that then, if they would raise a grave knight, then they could also raise a mummy.
They could raise a daddy.
Right.
Stupid joke.
The mummy. Is it dead or alive? Human or inhuman? You'll know. You'll see. You'll feel the awful, creeping, crawling terror that stands your hair on end and brings a scream to your lips. There's nothing on earth like the mummy.
So the mummy, we have the idea of the mummy being like Egyptian mummies, Curse of the Mummy's
Cursed.
Tomb.
The mummy is not necessarily... So if you look upon the old Egyptian way, a mummy is not necessarily something of evil. It's like you've disturbed... they've been buried in the sarcophagus, and the magics that have been cast over it, that if you disturb it, that the mummy will attack you because you're disturbing its grave.
Right, disturbing its peace, disturbing its property or whatever like that.
Right.
That it's essentially waiting there as a cursed being, I guess, as a way to protect its own tomb or something like that, or to take revenge upon those who have broken into its tomb. Wayward archaeologists, that kind of stuff, or Egyptologists.
Right. But it is formed with magic, so therefore it is created usually by necromancy.
I would definitely think a mummy would be necromantic, and it would have malign intent. An Egyptologist is basically just going into a tomb to learn about the person who's in there. They're not. They could be grave robbers, but essentially,
well, they usually do rob the graves to take the stuff back to a museum.
Yeah,
and study
if you look at it that way, but then again, the mummy then would attack them to try to hang on to the stuff that they had in life. Even though they're dead, they don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those, questions that you raise up. And it makes good fodder for adventures. It really does when you have mummies.
I remember you guys had an adventure where you ran into a mummy. Mummies cause rotting, which will then turn you into a mummy.
So mummies, so some of their touch is it kind of like grave touch or mummy rot?
It's mummy rot. And if you die from mummy rot, then you come back as a mummy.
Does it bite you or scratch you? Does that what?
Yeah, scratching and biting and hitting and
yikes! Stay
punching
away
and whatever else.
And so that raises the question why a lot of undead seem to have like these touches or bites or things that cause rot. I guess because they're rotting, they kind of spread their rot to you.
Or the disease in their fingernails.
Yeah, like they're so filthy dirty under their nails. It's got grave soil under there, and the grave soil is like filthy, and you get it into your skin and stuff like that. It causes you to be sick. So that's like the necromantic part of this. But there's also kind of more naturally occurring kind of ghosts, and one of those would be poltergeist.
Poltergeist.
Well, poltergeist just literally means noisy ghost.
Yeah.
And whether you believe in them,
or troublesome ghost.
Troublesome ghost. Whether you believe in them or not, they've been with us for hundreds and hundreds of years. I remember reading about some of the earliest occurrences of them was in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
Where people would experience these sudden kind of bangs and doors slamming and stuff falling off the shelf.
Scratches.
And, shouts and things that they would attack children or owners of a house if they moved into a house. That kind of thing. Poltergeists are really common. If you watch any of the ghost story stuff on TV, they always have like these poltergeists that...
Well, there were all the movies, Poltergeist. And Poltergeist 2.
Poltergeist
3,
movie
4,
and stuff, and they would they would turn on the faucets at night or turn things on and off. So they're kind of troublesome. And a lot of times it's just because they don't want you around. They don't want you in their house.
Yeah, or their area.
Or their area. Now, you could, okay, so would you think
chaotic?
They're chaotic. Would they be evil? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? I mean,
I know what the books say, but
well, yeah, what the books say, but that doesn't mean we always have to lump them into that category.
right.
Essentially, they're like a ghost that refuses to move on. Is that
Maybe they didn't want to.
Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe that doesn't mean they're evil. They just don't want to move on.
Yeah, but they're definitely chaotic.
Oh yeah, I mean they're more so than a ghost. I think Peltergeist is really chaotic because they're so troublesome and so, and they're so they do all these
together.
they do all these little tricks and stuff like that, and they're so, they're so annoying and stuff like that. So I would tend to see them as being more chaotic.
Yeah. Poltergeists are kind of fun and interesting. I remember a poltergeist, and that was in the more Wicca.
Yeah.
That one was kind of a troublesome, noisy one.
Yeah, you can get them. They are annoying. They do stuff up to you, and they,
try to scare you away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you've written down shadow. So what's a shadow?
Who knows?
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows.
What's a shadow?
The shadow knows. The shadow is kind of like a ghost. It's a person who's died and refuses to go on, but they're usually more evil bent and destruction. And getting killed by a shadow makes you come back as a shadow.
Again, we have that thing where
they hide in the shadows because they look like a shadow. And
okay.
A lot of times, what they do is you're walking around the dungeon, they come up and they make you think you've got your shadow there. It's a shadow. Yeah, it's a shadow there. It's the shadow monster, and it attacks you and turns you into a shadow.
Okay. So again, we have this idea that they can recreate or they can reproduce by corrupting you and making you into a shadow.
Yeah, they're from the plane of shadow.
Ah, they're from a different plane.
Yeah.
How does that compare with shade?
I think they're kind of similar.
Because we've encountered shades before, but I've never really known. There's kind of like these shadow beings. But I kind of have an idea that a shade is more like not a ghost, or maybe a ghost, but maybe a malicious intent.
Yeah.
Or something that kind of hides in the shadows and comes out and attacks you. And that's kind of an interesting idea. I kind of look at that because I'm not quite sure how a shade works in with the shadow.
They're very similar.
Okay.
Very similar in a lot of ways.
Okay. We've kind of talked about skeletons.
Right.
Skeletons, one of those things that everybody throws out. One thing I will say, if you always should keep a melee weapon on your person, whether it's just an axe or a club, because if you get jumped by a bunch of skeletons, arrows don't do a whole lot of good because they just fly right. Yeah, they just fly right through. So make sure you got an axe with you or some kind of a bludgeoning weapon so you can bludgeon skeletons, break them apart again.
That's kind of the great thing, that teaches players that your sword isn't always the best weapon.
Exactly.
Or your arrow.
Yeah.
Shoot an arrow goes right through it.
Yeah, the bane of all archers. That's skeletons because you're like, oh, don't do much to them. Dang.
Nope. 1 point.
Well, can I pick up a club somewhere? Well, there's none around. Can I break a chair and get a chair leg? All right, you got a chair leg. You got a simple club. Now you're going to have to start beating on these skeletons with a simple club.
You're in close combat as the skeletons chopping at you with rusty weapons.
Yeah, so that's not always the best thing.
Yeah. Okay, vampires.
So now we get on to a little more complex when we're talking about undead. Now, of course, vampires are undead, but vampires in themselves are usually beings with agendas or actions or things that they're doing.
They're not stupid, usually.
No. They're usually
intelligent, highly charismatic.
Vampire lords. I mean, we talk about vampire lords a lot.
Yeah.
And so they're almost like a wizard in a sense that they have powers. Or even a cleric, that they have powers that they exhibit. And, vampires can be many things. They can be highly charismatic. They can be very powerful. They can be very difficult to defeat. They're definitely high-level characters.
Very diplomatic.
Yeah, they can be. And vampires in themselves can even rule a vampire kingdom of vampires.
Mm-hmm.
I think Castlevania, I think that's like one that kind of comes to my mind, is something like that, where you've got like basically vampire lords and stuff all over.
Yeah, of course, you've got, the age-old Dracula and Nosferatu.
Dracula, Nosferatu, yeah. Now in Galarian, what's that land where basically vampires kind of run the whole area?
Ustalav.
Ustalav,
It's not
yeah.
necessarily vampires run it, but they're vampires. It's kind of their answer to Ravenloft.
Okay, Ravenloft, that's kind of, I wanted to think about that too. People have built whole game systems around vampires.
Well, there's a whole big adventure. There was, Count von Strahd, who's very popular in the D&D universe.
Okay. They're a different kind of undead. They're definitely not like a nuisance kind of undead. This is whole campaign adventure plotline undead.
Well,
You
then when you get into even Warhammer, there's a whole vampire.
There's a whole vampire area.
Yeah.
So, vampires, they basically, they make other vampires by biting people. And of course, not all vampires do that. Some refuse to reproduce.
Yeah.
Vampires, then, would they be good or evil? Well, I think they can be both.
I think they could be either, because if you look in the Warhammer book, there was Ulrika,
Yeah.
who has a 3-book series. Plus, she's in the Gotrek and Felix.
Yeah.
She gets turned into a vampire, not by her choice. And she didn't want it, and so she's part of this whole vampire family. But she's not evil. She's there to fight the evil.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have these different kind of plot lines where a vampire, essentially, even if they live in the shadow, even if they, they're driven by thirst, they may not be there for, malicious purposes. They may be trying to cure themselves or right some wrongs while they are in vampiric form.
Yeah, because that's an interesting thing. The Ulrika books, to me, she's a very in-depth character because of that.
Yeah.
She's not this, she doesn't want to suck blood, but she's got to live. But, she's not evil, and she's not there to do evil intent. She's there to do better and try and better herself. And
yeah. I mean, the whole thing about vampires is that you can construct a huge mythos around them, in a whole series of adventures in vampiric worlds or against vampires, and have good or bad ones and everything like that. It's really amazing.
I remember an adventure that we went on that the party had run into a certain vampire, and when we were in the lands, we needed some information, and your character and my character went to him, and the party was just adamant about us not going because this vampire was bad and evil, and we went and talked to the vampire and we got the information.
Yeah.
He tried to turn us to his ways, but he knew that we weren't going to attack him and kill him, so he didn't see us as a threat. And
we came to an accord with him regarding, and we did get some very important information. I don't know what we traded, but it wasn't anything morally compromising.
No.
But the rest of the players were tremendously upset that we would even commune in a way, or even talk to a vampire. And because I think we might have had, did we have a paladin in that group?
I don't remember.
I think we had a good fighter or something who was like really threatening us with stuff. And I don't know, to me it's kind of like, it just didn't make any sense really that, they would become so upset about the whole situation. It just made sense more for a really interesting plot line that we were able to actually deal with this vampire for one reason or another. It just made more sense.
Yeah. Vampires are interesting.
Yeah, they are.
I've actually thrown them in a few adventures.
They're really they're a good plot line. They really are.
They can be.
Yeah.
White?
A white and a wraith. Are they the same?
So a white, no. So a white has a form to it.
Okay.
And they're usually what's inside of a mound. So when Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, after leaving Tom Bombadil, they go to the mounds, the burial mounds, and they run into the whites.
The bear whites,
Yes.
Yeah, so they would be malicious, naturally occurring ghosts who want to hurt you.
Yes.
I guess it's kind of how I've seen them.
They're more like a zombie, but more powerful than a zombie. But they're not. And to die by a white brings you back as a white.
Another way to reproduce. That's one. These are ways that undead can reproduce.
Yeah,
they're created, or they can be repopulated and brought back by bites or contact with undead. I've never actually known exactly what a white would be. I just kind of assume they're just kind of like banshees in a way.
No, they have form. They have form. They're more like like a zombie in that respect, but they're not slow moving.
Okay.
They're not stiff like a zombie. Brains, you know.
Okay.
A wight is very fast moving, and very very vicious, and very evil.
Wow. Okay. I don't know why I ever confused them with Wraith. I know because the Wraith I know is different. Wraith can like move through walls.
Wraith
and
is
stuff.
more like a ghost.
Yeah.
But once again, if a Wraith kills you, you come back as a Wraith.
Right. I just had this thing that Wraith can move through walls, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they can just move. They're kind of incorporeal.
Yeah,
that
they are
can
an
move.
incorporeal creature from the plane of shadow.
Okay, they're from the plane of shadows.
Yep.
So now with Wraiths we encountered quite often. They tend to come up through walls and chase you around and do a lot of damage. I've had characters killed by Wraiths. I had one character killed by a Wraith. That was my bard.
Well, there was the giant wights that you ran into in the current campaign.
Oh, that's true. They were deep in that tomb.
And your male witch, got killed by the wight.
Right.
He came back
Yeah.
as one.
He came back, and we had to kill them all over again. Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
That was really interesting. It was a good way to introduce undead, and to kind of have a plot line of our male witch like being very ambitious about running into the shadows.
The witch would never split the party.
Yeah, don't split the party.
witch, I'm gonna go look at these skeletons. These skeletons of dragons over here, and steps 50 plus feet out of the light of the party and gets jumped by giants and giant wights and
yeah, we couldn't help.
the smackdown.
There's no way we could get there in time, and plus they were very powerful, way more powerful than us.
Well, you guys, I think, were 5th or 6th level at the time, but
we didn't have a very powerful cleric. Our cleric was just kind of mediocre at that time. She's gotten a lot more powerful now. Of course, one of the things that people always talk about when they talk about undead, of course, are zombies.
Yeah.
And the old traditional zombie, really wasn't an undead, but was more like a slave under mind control. And somehow it got turned around to where zombies are now undead. We all know about like The Walking Dead and stuff like that.
Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, World War Z, that kind of stuff. There's zombies are essentially animated dead things that attack you to make more zombies. Now, are they a popular thing for DMs to introduce into a game?
Oh yeah.
And they claw and bite, right?
They claw and they bite. Yeah.
Yeah.
But usually getting killed by a zombie doesn't bring you back as a zombie like they do in the movies.
Okay. I always thought that was the case.
No.
Do you have to worry about them scratching and biting you?
You can get diseased. Now it's up to the DM. If your DM wants the zombie to bring you back as a zombie, then sure, yeah, why not?
Okay. Wow.
But typically not. Let the magic and the disease that flows from them, get bit by. Because typically in movies, if you get bit by a zombie, well, you're zombie now.
You're zombie, yeah. I remember you've got some zombies, little green plastic guys, that we would throw out every once in a while. Okay, it's 2 or 3 zombies. It's like, all right, are these zombies just like wandering around the graveyard in circles, like looking for something or something? Or are they just, wandering around at night, coming after people? That kind of thing. It's kind of like zombies, I always feel, are these things that DMs throw in at the beginning so that you can chop them up, and kill them easy.
I'm kind of a deviant of that pirate board. Tom's character's a zombie. He's got to eat brains.
Got to eat brains every day. Yeah, that's kind of weird. I mean, zombies, though, are not naturally occurring, right? They're raised.
They're typically raised. They're created
by a necromancer.
Yeah.
Okay, that is kind of.
Which brings us to let's throw out a scenario here.
Okay.
Let's say you've got a monastery of clerics, and they're kind of helpless, but they've got magical abilities, and maybe they do have the ability to raise dead. And there's this graveyard out there. Well, maybe they're being attacked by a horde of orcs. Who's to say that that cleric says, "Hey, we need protection. We can't really fight. We don't have the manpower. Let's raise the skeleton and zombies up to help defend ourselves."
That's an interesting concept. I mean,
there's a whole campaign.
There's a whole campaign right there. Would those clerics be bad then for doing that, defending themselves by using an army of undead?
Yeah, by using necromancy.
Yeah, I mean, you would of course banish the undead after it was all over, or get rid of them.
Or maybe they keep them around as protection.
Maybe. I mean, it's kind of an interesting concept when you bring up the idea of necromancy. most people consider necromantic stuff to be evil
Yeah.
because you're enforcing your will upon something else. You're essentially making them a slave by raising them up. But what if you did it for a good cause, like defending a bunch of innocent people in a castle from
Or village or
a
whatever.
village from a horde of like
Bugbears or
barbarians
orcs or
or
barbarians
bugbans, or orcs or something who are bent on
Or
destruction.
an evil invading army.
Yeah. What if you did that? Well, that's an interesting moral conundrum, and it would be kind of cool, to explore that in a game to see what would happen. On the other side of that, because we've come across with other undead things before, one of those would be like a Draugr,
Right.
and that's
the Draugr.
and that's usually like in Norse mythology, it's an undead warrior who comes back.
Who's drowned usually.
Yeah, and but it can also be like a bad dwarf, like an undead dwarf.
Yeah. Or somebody who has been wronged and now
Yeah.
they've come back.
Revenge oriented, kind of more like a fighter. Draugrs to me always tend to be like fighters.
Yeah.
In Skyrim, of course, Draugrs are restless undead who always attack you. You go into their tombs and they attack. So they're always kind of like fighters, defenders of tombs possibly, but they're typically a fighter. In your game, we've had undead Draugrs before.
Well, there was the Draugr that was in the cave that the bugbears. Well, the cave had been opened up, and the bugbears had crawled into the cave and opened up his tomb
Yeah.
and stolen things off of him, and he came after him.
Yeah,
And he pretty much helped you guys defeat
he did.
the bugbears. And
Yeah.
then when he started walking towards you, his eyes glowing blue, you all just kind of walked away, and he just kind of looked at you, and it's like, okay, you're not blocking me, and went on his way.
Yeah, it's
But then there's the villagers who said, "Oh, there's an undead coming. Let's stop it."
yeah, and they got slaughtered because they stood in its way.
And then there was the Ulfdragar.
See, that was different. Now that was he was a fighter too.
He was a fighter. He was a great fighter.
But he had been wronged.
He had been severely wronged.
And so in revenge, he would come back and fight those who he thought had wronged him. But we had to break the curse.
Right.
And so that he could actually travel on to the nether realm.
Now, what was the Ulfdragar? Now, Ulf.
That's wolf.
That's Norse for wolf.
So he was not a werewolf, but he was a fighter. We think he was a fighter of like a wolf clan.
Right.
Who
worshipped the wolf goddess.
Who worshipped the wolf goddess. And the thing is that he had been terribly betrayed and wronged. And he had his, kind of like in Game of Thrones, he'd had a wolf's head nailed onto his head.
Sewed onto it.
Sewed onto his body. And so we had the pleasure of fighting this guy with glowing eyes of a wolf's head who was a tremendous warrior. But we had to break his curse.
Yeah.
And that was the most important thing, is you don't really want to fight a Draugr. You want to figure out what made them a Draugr in the first place, break their curse, so then they leave you alone.
Yeah, so then they pass on to the next world.
Yeah.
So anyway, undead.
Undead. We'd be glad to hear what your thoughts are about them.
Yeah, and we just covered the basic forms of undead.
Oh, man, there's so many.
In the systems. There's so many undead, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
So we just hit upon the core basics of them. So anyway, we hope you like this episode. That if you do, please like, share, subscribe, spread the word, ring the bell, leave a comment. We'll reply to your comment, even if it's, wow, that's a cool idea, or wow, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing, whatever. We do at least reply to your comment. So
Sure.
Anyway, thanks for watching this episode of Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
And may all your adventures be epic and not rising up.
And keep on rolling, folks.
Have a good one.